Good morning and welcome. We are kicking off another week of video devotions through the book of 2 Samuel with 2 Samuel chapter 19. So we are so glad to have you with us today. Now, when we read about King David, when we think about David, I'd imagine we often think of David as this incredibly strong and capable military commander. And it's probably right that we think of David in that way because he was an incredibly strong and capable leader. Throughout 1 and 2 Samuel, we've read about the success of his military conquest. He was certainly those things. But what I've been reminded of time and time again in 1 and 2 Samuel is just how remarkably forgiving and gracious and merciful David was as well. And see, I think we often think of strength in just one way. We think of it as might, as power, as authority, and strength can be those things. But if you ask me what's so remarkable about David, what makes him such a strong figure, such a faithful person especially, is his willingness and his ability to forgive. And I was reminded of that especially this morning as I read through chapter 19, because there's several instances in this chapter when David is confronted by people that have done him wrong. There's an individual who mocked him when Absalom took over as king of Israel and David was fleeing, and David forgives that individual. There's another person, Mephibosheth, who was actually King Saul's son, and you'll remember there's a backstory, a narrative between David and Mephibosheth prior to this, who essentially had abandoned David when David was no longer king over Israel. And David extends mercy and grace and forgiveness to Mephibosheth as well. And if you'll remember, there's been so many instances in David's life when people have done just horrendous things to him. Think of all the things that King Saul put him through. And then think of all the times David was willing to extend mercy and grace and forgiveness to him. And see, to me, that's what's so remarkable about King David, maybe even more remarkable than his reputation as this powerful military commander, is that he could be that powerful commander, but he could also show so much grace and mercy and forgiveness as well. And I don't know about you, but I think in our world, perhaps that's the kind of strength that we're lacking in our leaders. We live in a world where it's not common, maybe, certainly not as common as it should be, to extend grace and mercy to others, especially others who disagree with us or who think differently or vote differently or look differently than us. There's just not enough grace and mercy and forgiveness in our world today. And I think if we can learn anything from our study of David and of his life, is that we can never go wrong by extending grace and mercy and forgiveness, because that's precisely what God has done for each and every one of us. So I want to leave you with that this morning, and we will see you on Thursday for 2 Samuel chapter 20.